So the casting of Nani in the live-action Lilo and Stitch is absolutely atrocious for obvious reasons. But wait, doesn't that make me a hypocrite? Isn't it a double standard that I condemn the fact that a dark-skinned indigenous Polynesian character is being played by a light-skinned actor with physical features that lean European, but I vocally celebrate the perfect casting of Ariel in the live-action Little Mermaid, in which a traditionally white character is being portrayed by a black actor? Well, I wish I lived in a universe where that was a double standard, where you could actually equate the two. But it's truly shocking how many people choose to ignore or simply just don't understand the context and nuances of these situations. And hold up, before you start typing your automatic response to this subject, please listen to the whole video because I'm most likely going to tackle whatever argument or viewpoint you present. I did make a YouTube short on this topic, but was unable to really cover everything I needed to in under a minute, so many questions were left unanswered. But here we go. I don't really want to get into the obvious point that the racial element of the character of Nani is essential within the story, and it's actually important for her to be Native Hawaiian / Indigenous Polynesian, while Ariel is a mythological creature, and even if she wasn't, her race has nothing to do with the story at all. It's completely irrelevant. The original author of the story, Hans Christian Andersen, was Danish. However, the story itself wasn't specifically set in Denmark, and even if it was, it doesn't matter because the Disney version had a tropical setting and was so far removed from the original Hans Christian Andersen tale, only very loosely being inspired by it, that any faithfulness to the original is irrelevant when it comes to that Disney version. It's like comparing Frozen to the Snow Queen, which was also written by Hans Christian Andersen. And I could go on and on about people's forced concerns when it comes to cultural authenticity of the Danish, but I don't want to get into that silly, pathetic, desperate attempt to justify people not liking that Ariel is portrayed by a black woman, so let's just end that part of the discussion. We've established that Nani's race is actually important and Ariel's isn't. And some of you have said to me, the Nani actress, Sydney Agudong, is Native Hawaiian, so it's wrong of me to complain that she's not Native Hawaiian enough. Honey, she was only born in Hawaii. Anybody of any race can be born in Hawaii. She is a Hawaiian native, but she is not Native Hawaiian. Native Hawaiian is the indigenous race of Hawaii. They're brown Polynesian people, and though many people who were born in Hawaii are referred to as Hawaiians, they are only Hawaiian citizens. They are not Native Hawaiians. They do not have indigenous ancestry. They are not Polynesian. Sydney Agudong is not the same race as the character of Nani. Sydney Agudong's mum is white, and her dad is Filipino. She has the same racial background as Olivia Rodrigo, but not Nani. So she is taking away one of the very few lead roles that has ever been available for a Native Hawaiian. The rare chance for a Polynesian woman to be in the spotlight has been snatched away, and you can look at all the ugly stuff that is being inflicted upon the indigenous people of Hawaii to be further grossed out by that, but that's not what this video is about. And also, this is where things are going to get juicy and more nuanced. Even if it turned out that Sydney Agudong did have some Polynesian ancestry, it'd still be icky having her play Nani, because it'd still be colorism, and colorism is a major problem in Hollywood. When casting directors, producers, and filmmakers are choosing someone to fill a minority role, particularly one where the character was originally depicted as having dark skin, they almost always gravitate towards light skin, Eurocentric features, and people of biracial makeup. And this is even more common when it comes to women of color. It indicates that non-white people must be mixed race or have some Caucasian ancestry to be perceived or considered beautiful enough, valuable enough, digestible enough for Western audiences to be at the forefront. There may be some exceptions, but they're definitely not the rule. And obviously, inclusion of all shades and colors is very necessary, but light-skinned actors with less broad features are far, far more likely to be cast. And finally, when the rare opportunity for darker-skinned, broad-featured folks arrives for them to get their moment to shine, it's taken away in favor of yet another light-skinned, mixed-race person. And in the case of the Nani casting, somebody who isn't even the correct race. Because as long as white is the standard in Hollywood, everyone with even a trace of non-white in them, and everyone with some racial ambiguity, is interchangeable with every other person of color. I've seen an ungodly amount of people fan cast Jenna Ortega as Princess Tiana. They're recommending a light-skinned Mexican woman to play the first ever black Disney princess, who was dark-skinned and a monumental figure in the black community. And I've seen even more people fan cast Zendaya as Moana, so they don't care if a biracial black woman is playing one of the only Polynesian lead characters ever. Instances like this just show that those people actually don't care about skin color or cultural authenticity as long as a non-white person is not portraying a traditionally white character. As long as they don't feel as if they're being replaced or pushed off their pedestal, which is not even happening, everything else is fair game. And sometimes people who are just straight up white are cast as people of color, and the people who cry about the reverse tend to remain quiet in these cases. And this didn't just happen in the past, it continues now. I think most of us know that since the beginning of cinema, people of color have been horribly represented, sidelined, stereotyped, absent, and most prominently whitewashed, portrayed by white people, and that is still prevalent. Recently, I've seen Scarlett Johansson play an Asian, Jake Gyllenhaal play a Persian, Johnny Depp and Rooney Mara playing indigenous characters, just to name a few, and the people who are vocally negative about the casting of Ariel were very quiet when these films came out. Most of the movies and pieces of media that exist in the world and have been immortalized on film forever don't represent people of color in a positive way. That's just the truth, and there's a lot of making up to do for it. I've gotten some comments that say two wrongs don't make a right regarding the comparing of the casting of Nani in Lilo and Stitch and Ariel in The Little Mermaid, and I'm just astounded by the lack of awareness here. Like, first of all, I guarantee those people never bat an eye the hundreds of times white people have been cast as non-white characters throughout all of history up until now. And secondly, if we lived in a world where there was an equal playing field for people of all races and colors and shades, and there was no such thing as minorities or oppression or colonialism or racism, and everyone was on an equal level systemically and elsewhere, then neither the casting of Nani or the casting of Ariel would be quote-unquote wrong. But like I said, it's not even remotely an equal playing field. The idea of two wrongs don't make a right does not apply, because there is only one wrong in this scenario, and that's further perpetuating colorism and whitewashing, which is very prominent within the entire landscape of media that exists in this world, and the reverse just isn't. Which obviously shapes the way we've been trained to see the world, and why it's so jarring for people to see a person of color where they didn't expect to. So many more types of films need to be put out into the world, particularly films that don't treat skin color as a limitation for non-white people, because it always has been, especially for those of darker shades. All of the films in the history of cinema that erase, misrepresent, and whitewash people of color are readily available for people to watch over and over until the end of time, and I'm sure most people don't even realize that they're watching something that is guilty of these things because it's so normalized. But casting a person of color in a traditionally white role is not normalized, hence the extreme controversy over Halle Bailey as Ariel, which is so ironic because there's absolutely zero chance anybody could have played that role better than her. Nobody could have brought what she brought. She is just magical. Yet people are completely blindsided because she doesn't have the exact same shade of skin as the animated character. They can't see past that, even though the other Disney live-action characters had much bigger differences from the animated counterparts, and nobody cared. So don't say you just wanted to see her look visually similar to the animated character and that's why you're upset, because none of them have. There was no extreme backlash. But if you want to hear more about that, I'd cover it in my video comparing the casting of Ariel with the casting of Belle from Beauty and the Beast, so watch that. However, I just want to say, do you really think Halle Bailey doesn't look like Ariel? Because even though cartoon characters have more exaggerated features, they have very similar features. You just have to not let your knowledge that she's black stop you from saying that. But I digress. Now, I've heard lots of people say that they should just make new characters for people of color instead of giving them quote-unquote leftovers. Leftovers? A character like Ariel is a major iconic role to be filled. Those are some big fins to step into. For anyone, it'd be a downright honor to be that character, and to see a person of color be the one to so gloriously bring Ariel to life, embodying her perfectly in a world where skin color has always been a limitation for non-white people and has restricted them from spaces they're more than qualified to occupy, it's beautiful. People of color should be able to step into spaces and roles that they've always been restricted from and have that escapism, have that moment to shine, have that validation, have that knowledge that they can be their favorite Disney princess, that the shade of their skin isn't a restriction. And obviously we need original stories and characters as well, but Hollywood today primarily consists of reboots, remakes, sequels, and other adaptations of IPs that mostly revolve around pre-established characters because that's what makes money. So there'd be a lot fewer non-white people on our screens if it weren't for colorblind casting. And generally, why not include people who haven't ever had a place in beloved, familiar fairy tales and stories that are told over and over again? Like, remakes are gonna happen. Why exclude non-white people? I mean, some of you are acting like people of color are a different species. Didn't want to turn to preaching, but damn, I really can't sit here and watch people be so vocally ignorant and misguided about progress. And some people are saying that colorblind casting is only making things worse, but that's also an argument that was used when people of color were first being integrated into white society, so like, do you see the parallels? Whenever there's a push to bring a minority group onto the same level as the ones on top, many people feel threatened, as if they're being replaced and pushed off their pedestal and be made to be perceived as less special, less powerful, less privileged, when in reality it's just an attempt at bringing all humans to an equal playing field, because the reality is that white people don't live in the same context as people of color. That's just how it is. And white passing people, as well as people with more Eurocentric physical appearances, also don't live in the same context as other non-white people whose appearances are less ambiguous. And let me just ask you personally, rhetorically, do you have a problem with the casting of Nani in Lilo and Stitch? If you don't, do you have a problem with the casting of Ariel in the live-action Little Mermaid? Because it seems that most people, not all, but most people, who accept the casting of Nani do not accept the casting of Ariel. Maybe stop and ask yourself why that is. Like, actually think about why one bothers you and the other doesn't. And don't say it's because you want revenge for what they did to Ariel or whatever excuse that is, because characters are whitewashed in media all the time from the beginning of cinema until now. It's a far more common thing to whitewash a character than it is to practice colorblind casting, which is a relatively new thing. And you probably didn't care or notice all the whitewashing and colorism because it's so prevalent and always has been. Anyway, if you're with me, I love you. If you're not with me, I think it's very necessary that you're being challenged in this way. It's important to challenge traditional expectations because we've been trained to see things very differently, but I hope you take the time to reflect on your response to everything and pinpoint why you feel the way you do rather than reacting emotionally on public platforms and spewing ignorant poop. Lastly, I just want to remind you that none of these castings would be a big deal if equality was a thing. Yeah, it's all about context, people. Seek a history book. Oh wait, most of those are whitewashed too. Anyway, goodbye.